Everybody again, we are going to start our last session of this workshop, and we are going to listen the interesting conference of Professor Boaz sangero, who is a full professor of law at both Western Galilee College and Sapir Academic College School of Law, both in Israel. He's the founder and head of the Institute for Safety in the Criminal Justice System, and he combines the areas of criminal law, criminal evidence, and criminal procedure in his teaching and writing about safety and from false convictions. And of course, he's going to talk us about these topics today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm going to talk about false convictions based on flawed forensic science evidence. Secondly, I will talk about modern safety in other areas such as aviation, transportation, and engineering. Thirdly, I'll offer to use the STAMP safety model to prevent false convictions based on forensic science evidence. STAMP means System Theoretic Accident Model and Processes. I'll explain later. Finally, I will briefly show how the STAMP safety model can be applied to confessions and to eyewitness identifications. Scientific evidence has been expected to improve the accuracy of criminal law. Although DNA testing and fingerprint comparison are considered circumstantial evidence, they are substantially more accurate than traditional or direct evidence, including the testimony of eyewitnesses and confession by the defendant. But the American Innocence Project reported that the misapplication of forensic findings is the second largest contributor to wrongful convictions, accounting for 45% of DNA exoneration cases. The Daubert ruling made it the responsibility of judges to keep non-scientific evidence out of the courtroom. Daubert specified 4 admissibility criteria for scientific evidence. First, it must be based on a method that adheres to Karl Popper's principle of falsifiability. Second, it must have a known error rate. Third, the method must be published in a peer-reviewed publication. And fourth, the method must be accepted by the relevant scientific community. Nevertheless, judges and jurors alike are often blinded by the aura of science, and as a result, tend to overestimate the probative strengths of scientific evidence. Because they usually lack scientific expertise, judges rely on expert witnesses to interpret the results of forensic tests for them. When a court admits a certain type of evidence as scientific, without scientific justification, it sets a precedent that other courts are liable to follow, making that type of evidence admissible for many years to come. This is how microscopic comparisons of bite marks on skin, shoe prints, and hair, widely regarded today as junk science, made their way into courtrooms over the years. Except for DNA testing, where the probability of random match is very low, every other type of test can produce random match. Additionally, both labs and experts are susceptible to errors in the results and interpretations, even when test protocols have been followed. Indeed, errors are the underlying cause of many false convictions. But because of the undue weight ascribed to scientific evidence, the possibility of error in lab testing is generally ignored. Often, the scientific evidence that experts present in court is considered irrefutable, and every identification of a person is treated as definitive. This is based on the premise that every individual is unique, a conjecture that is not supported by empirical data, except in the case of DNA comparisons. Based on the premise of uniqueness, forensic scientists may attest to certain identification in court without having conducted rigorous data collection and incidence calculation based on a proven methodology. Forensic experts systematically violate the fundamental principles of science, according to which probabilistic and quantitative estimates must be based on solid methodology and anchored in empirical data. Courts are often misled by the language that experts use when testifying. The 2009 National Academy of Sciences report on forensic science found substantial improvements are needed for the forensic science system to function properly. For example, forensic lab workers allegedly conduct scientific testing, but the report found that many lack adequate training and academic knowledge. Academic research, as well as a series of organizational and structural upgrades, are needed in areas such as training, qualifications, best practices, and the accreditation of laboratories. There is an imbalance of power between the prosecution and the defense regarding the scientific evidence presented in court. Most of the evidence is presented by the prosecution, and judges tend to ascribe greater weight to the testimony of expert witnesses for the prosecution than to the testimony of witnesses for the defense. Generally, forensic laboratories are not autonomous. Rather, they are part of the law enforcement system, operating with the police and the prosecution. This fact casts doubt over their independence and objectivity. Sometimes pressure is applied on lab personnel to produce evidence in support of the prosecution. Police investigators are also in a position to supply lab personnel with details that may be irrelevant to the forensic test being performed, but may bias test results by reinforcing general perception of a suspect's guilt. There have been reports of instances where lab workers were encouraged to only conduct tests that were likely to incriminate the suspects and not those that may prove their innocence or incriminate someone else. Studies of criminal prosecution found forensic labs have been fostering a non-scientific subculture aimed at serving the needs of the police investigators. Many types of evidence that forensic science presents in court have not been vetted by scientists because they were developed specifically for solving crimes. For example, comparisons of marks left at the scene of the crime with those made by objects or body parts of the defendant, microscopic comparisons of fibers, and even earprint analysis. The National Academy of Sciences report evaluated the scientific basis for every type of forensic evidence and determined that, I quote, with the exception of nuclear DNA analysis, no forensic method has been rigorously shown to have the capacity to consistently and with a high degree of certainty demonstrate a connection between evidence and a specific individual or source, end of quote. Therefore, a significant reform is needed. The next topic is modern safety. I deserve a little water. Forensic science, as well as the criminal justice system, in general should be categorized as what is known in safety engineering as a safety critical system. False convictions, like the crashes of combat planes, are system errors, and like plane crashes, cause enormous damages and costs. In aviation, the original safety approach was one of fly, fix, fly. According to this method, planes continued to fly until an accident occurred, whereupon they would investigate the cause of the accident, fix the defect, and let the planes fly until the next accident. As planes became significantly more expensive because of the advanced technologies they incorporated, this method became inadequate. Learning from experience became too costly, and an entirely new approach to safety called identify, analyze, control emerged over 70 years ago and replaced the fly, fix, fly method. Its objective was to prevent accidents before they occur. First time safe. Modern safety identifies hazards systematically, analyzes and assesses them, and controls them with necessary measures. A critical element is that of risk assessment, which provides the data needed to prioritize hazards, assesses whether the associated risks are acceptable, and allocates the resources needed to manage the risks. Methods of modern safety have spread from aviation to a variety of other fields, including transportation, engineering, labor, and lately, medicine. Modern safety systems are based on the understanding that the safety of individual components alone, separate from the system as a whole, cannot achieve system safety. This system emphasizes safety, education, and training, conduct routine professional risk assessment, and deploy perpetual improvement programs. To develop adequate safety methods, an organizational safety culture must be instituted with the participation of employees and management and include extensive communication between them. Management must display safety leadership and nurture a culture of learning, best practices, and accepting responsibility rather than laying blame. Modern safety demands that not only accidents be reported, but also incidents or near accidents, which can develop into accidents. The investigation of incidents is a critical component of safety. Forensic science laboratories should also be required to report incidents, such as the mistaken substitution of samples. Such reports would make it possible to safety committees to investigate errors and incidents and to recommend solutions within a non-blaming process. Another important modern safety method is redundancy, which reduces the likelihood that the failure of a single component leads to a complete system failure. For their mission-critical systems, high reliability organizations resort to duplication of critical components, like using backup computers, and duplication of personnel, like assigning more than one employee to perform safety checks. A final key principle of safety is the permanent pursuit of improvement and ongoing effort to increase safety and reduce hazard. Thus, as soon as safety goals are reached, higher goals are adopted. Now, I will talk about applying the stamp safety model to forensic science evidence. I've observed several safety methods, and the model that I have found most helpful for the criminal justice system is the stamp model, or system theoretic accident model and processes. According to the STAMP model developed by Professor Nancy Leveson from MIT, who is the safety advisor of NASA, the safety complex systems cannot be entrusted to traditional safety methods. To engineer safer systems, Leveson proposed shifting the emphasis from component reliability to system control. STAMP begins by examining the system to determine its safety constraints within the limits of the system can operate without mishaps. For example, simple example, a safety constraint in a subway system is, quote, door must be capable of opening only after train is stopped and properly aligned with platform unless emergency exists. Devising similar constraints for forensic science will not only help prevent false convictions, but also increase the likelihood of identifying the perpetrators of crime. Next, hierarchical control structures need to be established to ensure that the safety constraints required for the system are enforced. Hazard analysis investigates accidents before they occur. Leveson demonstrates that STAMP is better suited than traditional hazard analysis for complex systems and for detecting human and software errors, system design errors, as well as organizational and management flaws. This is of particular relevance to forensic science because many of its failures, together with most failures in the criminal justice system, are not the result of technical errors, but rather a result of human errors or organizational and management flaws. I propose applying the STAMP safety model to forensic science evidence as part of the criminal justice system. Now I will show you a table that summarizes how it can be done. The table should be regarded as the beginning of an ongoing process of improvement. To reduce the rate of false convictions based on flawed forensic science evidence, we should combine current scientific knowledge, the National Academy of Sciences recommendations, and the normative legal rules while adapting them, all within the framework of advanced safety theory and methods. It is important to clarify that I do not claim my table necessarily includes all the safety constraints that are needed to make the system safe, and it certainly does not represent all the controls needed for enforcing these safety constraints. This can be determined following comprehensive groundwork by an Institute for Safety in the Criminal Justice System that I propose to establish. My goal is to demonstrate what general direction systematic safety thinking should take in order to develop safety in the criminal justice system and reduce the risk of wrongfully convicting innocent defendants. Now, let's look together at the first table. Everyone has a paper? I have more copies if needed. Everyone has got the paper? I refer to 4 hazards, and to each one of them, I define constraints that should be forced on the criminal justice system and controls for this enforcement. The first hazard, A, is flawed forensic science evidence is created. This is a hazard. Please look at the 4 safety constraints and the suggested controls. I will not read them with my poor English. You will read them, and we will move on to the second hazard. The second hazard, B, a misleading testimony is don't be afraid, there will not be an exam. The second hazard, B, a misleading testimony is provided by a forensic science expert. Please look at the 3 safety constraints and at the suggested controls. The third hazard, C, flawed or misleading forensic science evidence is admitted in court. See that now the constraints and controls are towards the judges and not towards the lab workers and experts as the constraints and controls that we have seen before. Please look at the 3 safety constraints and the suggested controls. And the last hazard, D, a defendant is convicted based on flawed or misleading forensic science evidence. Again, here the constraints and the controls are addressing the courts. Please look at the 2 safety constraints and the suggested controls. Now, let's move to another kind of evidence, analyzing confessions according to the stamp safety model. I do not have time for a background lecture on confessions, but fortunately, we have heard Rinat yesterday and Tali today. No. This is supervision, this is control. On the topic of confession. So I will show you please put aside the table regarding the science evidence, and now we will look at the table regarding confessions. Everyone has the paper? Okay, so here I refer to 4 hazards. The first hazard, an interrogation leads to a false confession. Please look at the 4 safety constraints and the suggested controls. The second hazard, a plea bargain leads to a false confession. Please look at the 4 safety constraints and the suggested controls. Now we get to hazard number 3. A false confession is admitted as evidence at trial. Please look at the 2 safety constraints and the suggested controls. Notice that now the constraints and controls are not towards the police and the prosecution, but towards the judges. Which are the main problem. Two. And the last hazard 4, a defendant is convicted based on a false confession. Here too, the constraints and controls are towards the judges. Please look at the 3 safety constraints and at the suggested controls. Now, if you was afraid that we'll go on till evening with more and more tables like this, the last one, applying the stamp safety model to prevent false convictions based on eyewitness misidentifications.
The last month, so the letters are smaller.
So, everyone has a paper. Here I refer to 3 hazards. The first hazard, A, police investigation, usually a lineup, leads to a witness false identification. Please look at the 3 safety constraints and at the suggested controls.
Sorry, could you repeat the meaning of stamp?
System, theoretic accident, model, and processes. I didn't invite it. It's Professor Nancy Levinson. She's an expert of safety. She's the advisor of NASA. She teaches in MIT. It's her credit. I just use it for the criminal justice system.
Okay.
The second hazard, a false eyewitness's identification is admitted as evidence at trial. So, of course, here the constraints and the controls would be toward the judges. Please look at the 6 safety constraints and the suggested controls. And the third and last hazard, C, a defendant is convicted based on a false eyewitness identification. Please look at the 2 safety constraints and the suggested controls. Thank you for your attention.